Kia ora tātou. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to this meeting of the Dunedin City Council. We will have
stepping stone.
order, please. In the public gallery, could I have some quiet? We're having a meeting. The opening prayer will be led by Monsignor John Harris.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Eternal God, you have been faithful to your promise. You have kept your word, and now we must strive to be the people that you made us to be. We must remember at all times that we are your creation, and trust with fashioning the world according to your will and purpose. As we lead this council, we pray that you will guide us, open our hearts and our minds, help us to see you in each other and in the world around us. In all that is discussed around the council table, give us tolerance, understanding and insight to see that justice is achieved for the benefit of all our citizens. Through your goodness, we are blessed in having a message of hope and love to transmit, and for this we thank you. We ask all of this in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. We conclude by praying the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Right, we will kick off the council meeting today with our public forum, and our first speaker at public forum is Mr. Carl Lappin, who will be speaking on the legal high retail location policy. Can I invite Mr. Lappin to come up here and address us?
You organise this block of submissions. They just seem to be on our desk.
This is just one submission through this one.
Hello? Right. I'm Carl Lappin from the Cupid Shop, and I'd like to move an amendment to do with the areas involved in the LAPP, because everybody in the council states related to the Dunedin City Central area and the CBD, which we're actually part of, because it goes down to 4499 Princess Street, and and the case of being is we fall in, I think, to all the valid reasons to actually retail the herbal highs. At the moment we sell the low form, 50 odd different products, and we have done with sort of no trouble or anything like that. But going back to the, if you see on the papers I presented you there, the map, it does include our area. Now I'm getting tongue tied. It boils down to one thing, that I think that the way it is worded is limiting to about 2 to 4 shops, and with alcohol involved, it's like herbal highs and alcohol are very much like fire is to petrol, very explosive. And where we are, there is no sort of drinking holes or nightclubs or anything like that. And I'm just trying to, been doing it for 30 years, 22 years we first sold something called Pink Panther. And we've been very, what you call low key, under the radar, nobody sort of went on. The period of the K2 everybody gets upset about we, as a shop, never sold any of that product. We never even had it in our door of that real, you could say addictive, the one that everybody talks about. And we try to be, as an owner of a shop, we try to do everything right and everything else. And we had moral times, and that's why we never sold it for that 12 months of the period when all the real bad things, because as a retailer, you get to know which are the good suppliers and bad suppliers. But going back, and my main thing is, when the council use the central city area, and according to their own maps, and also the, I think it's now called the 2GP scenario, it puts us in the area of the central city. And going back to, I think it's 2011, the council wanted to make Princess Street the same and equivalent as George Street. And now we're sort of feeling like the poor cousins when we cut off at Rattray Street. It just makes us feel at that end of town that we're not part of the central city, which we technically, according to the DCC's own maps, we are. Because of what I put on paper, I think I've probably said it all.
Thank you, Mr. Laffin. Are you happy to take questions?
I'm happy to take questions. I'm willing to take questions.
Councillors, any questions of Mr. Laffin? Councillor Kelvin.
Are anybody else in the way of businesses affected by the redrawing of the map too?
I don't know who's going to apply for a licence. That's the unknown fact.
So, but at the moment,
At the moment,
This
I've
came
been
in
the
with-
only one because of, with the 100-metre area, if I was allowed to be included, where I situated at 459 Princess Street, that would go to the end of the DCC's map where they say it ends at 499, I think the number was. It would bring me up to approximately the 100 metres. The other way would bring me up to just past where the old Lone Star used to be. And there's no, and if you look at the area, nobody's retailed down that area. And the reason, I know it might sound pedantic, I'm not trying to say myself, that's why I originally said the whole of Princess Street. And I know they went to the Oval, but I was trying to, you know, I'll be honest, I was trying to cover my own butt. But I mean, it gives everybody else part, because they call the Dunedin City area on the map, it does go to 499. But I'm the only one that's down there, but there was another one further along, but I have no clue if he's going to do it or not. But permanently it's just me, and being like we are an adult shop, and I know one of the reasons they used was surveillance and things like that, and there's been 3 cases where the police have been in the last 3 months and taken footage of our cameras to deal with crime outside on the street. And I should also, one I think was to do with the lady that we're missing from up Carroll Street.
Further questions, councillors? There are none. Mr. Laffin, thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you very much.
Our next submitter is Annalise de Groot, who will be speaking about work opportunities within the council. Can I invite you up, Annalise? Next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. My son is 28 years old and he has moderate autism. He lives with Mount Cargill Trust in a house with 2 other guys with autism, and his deepest wish is to get a part-time job. One of his passions is working outdoors, and he has successfully done a course where he has learned how to use weed eaters and motor mowers. For the past 3 years, I have tried to find him work together with the vocational staff at the Mount Cargill Trust. I have asked, pleaded and begged, but all I've been able to get him is some gardening for friends. My son never had a choice in getting this disability or this disadvantage. I was pleased to read in the ODT that the DCC has given a maintenance contract to a member of the Black Power gang. This man did have a choice and he decided to join a gang. Could the Council consider providing equal opportunities to other marginalised groups like people with intellectual disabilities? In many European countries, local councils are required to employ a certain number of people with physical and intellectual disabilities. Could that not be a requirement for Delta when the Council awards them their contract? Could we at least start a discussion around what our responsibilities are in supporting the weaker members in our society? It's very hard to see a hopeful future for a young man like my son and his friends. He has many friends who are in the same boat. And I am hoping that the councillors will be able to provide me with some answers, or maybe at least start a discussion around this in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor? You happy to take questions?
Yes, happy. Thank you.
Questions, Councillors? Councillor McTavish.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your submission. It is very timely because we are looking at our procurement policy, so the timing is good. The question that I have is whether in the work that you have been doing, looking for other employers, you mentioned one opportunity that you've managed to find for your son. Are you aware of other employers that have got procurement policies which include these provisions anywhere in New Zealand?
No, I'm not.
No. Okay. Thank you.
No, because this is just a private deal between me and a friend, that he comes on a Thursday afternoon and does 2 hours of gardening work for them. So they are actually really doing me a favour in a way. Yeah.
And the examples that you have given from overseas, I'm familiar with some of them, some Copenhagen and Malmö and others.
Yes.
Are you talking about a specific procurement policy that sits with one of those cities, or are you speaking in general?
Well, I'm very aware that the councils in Holland, for instance, have to have a certain percentage. Now, I'm not quite sure what that percentage is, but they need to employ people with disabilities, and a lot of other employers do that as well. I think if a governance group like the local councils would start this, then I'm sure that there will be a ripple effect, that other people will think, well, that is actually not such a bad idea. Most employers, if I talk to them, say, but it might take a bit of time and I can't guarantee, and sure, it might be a little bit complicated in the beginning, but I mean, yeah, you need to start somewhere, I guess.
Further questions, councillors? Thank you for your submission. We can't give you an assurance from council, but you'll be aware that our chief executive is responsible for employment, and as Councillor McTavish has said, we're involved with procurement policies now, so you can be assured that a conversation will be had considering your submission. Thank you.
That will be great. Thank you.
Our next submitters are Sienna Fitzjohn and Rosemary Penwarden. Are they here? Oil and Gas Block Office. Welcome.
Kia ora, my name is Sienna Fitzjohn and I'm representing Oil Free Otago. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Today we are imploring you, our elected representatives, to rework your submission on the 2016 oil and gas block offers and strongly oppose oil and gas exploration off the coasts of Aotearoa. I moved to Dunedin to do my Masters in Science Communication, but prior to that I did a Bachelor of Science, majoring in Geography, so hazards management is quite a familiar field for me. In the last submission made by this council on the 2015 block offers, the council raised concerns that the public had been excluded from all consultation processes. We'd like to commend you on that, because that's absolutely right. Since oil and gas exploration began in New Zealand, there has been a systematic exclusion of the public in all consultation processes. This is because the government know how severely unpopular this exploration process is. So the rest of the council's previous submission, however, is quite watery. You didn't take any strong position, and we believe that the council's stance should reflect the seriousness of this issue. So there was a section in your last submission titled risk and disaster management in view of outstanding natural environment. Now, when you have the word disaster in the same sentence as outstanding natural environment, you know that things have gone seriously awry. I'd also like to point out that when it gets to the stage of being a disaster, management becomes no longer possible. The word management suggests that we would have one iota of control over the effects of an oil spill. Our spill response consists of 3 vessels deemed unfit for open water. We are laughably and ill-equipped to manage any kind of oil spill. So once something like this occurs, we'd be kidding ourselves if we thought that our ecosystem would ever bounce back from that disaster. The Gulf of Mexico is a testament to that. Their ecosystem has been irreparably damaged. Their communities are still getting sick after exposure to the toxic chemical oil dispersant Corexit, which coincidentally is our first line of defence if we were to have a spill in New Zealand. Not to mention the cost of that oil spill stretched into the tens of billions of dollars. When Anadarko conducted their exploratory drilling in New Zealand, they were insured for a pitiful $30 million. But in all honesty, the extravagant costs of an oil-related disaster are completely irrelevant compared to what we'd actually be losing, which is an ecosystem, and that is something that you cannot put a monetary value on. So the Christchurch City Council just put in a very strong submission against the 2016 block offer, with Deputy Mayor Vicky Buck calling deep sea exploration sheer lunacy, and I couldn't have put that better myself. I think Vicky Buck and we both went through the same upheaval of the Christchurch earthquakes, and that has really enhanced our perception of risk. So nobody ever thought that Christchurch could be the epicentre of a major earthquake, yet it happened. A low probability of disaster occurring does not mean that they don't occur. Earthquakes are not preventable, but the risk of an oil spill can be completely eliminated by ceasing the exploration program in New Zealand. If we continue exploratory drilling, we can expect a major spill event statistically within the next 10 years. We're so incredibly privileged to live in a place with such a incredible natural heritage. People come from all around the world to marvel at our coastlines that we see on a daily basis. We don't realise how much the ocean is part of our identity. Having natural spaces and wildlife on our doorsteps offers us a tremendous source of emotional well-being, enhancing our experience and inspiring us. Time in natural places has been proven to have immense psychological benefits, including decreasing our stress hormone levels. And we rely on it for more than that. We rely on healthy coastlines for our recreation, food, and for our mental health. So the grief that would be wrought on this community by the effects of an oil spill would be severe, and it would be pervasive. I can't imagine how we'd recover from that. This kind of grief is immeasurable, and that's the kind of thing that risk assessment can never adequately take into account. As a community, we're really proud of our space, of our natural heritage, and our innovative potential. That's our cultural identity. We care about our natural surroundings, and we know who would be on the beach cleaning off oil if a spill occurred. It would be us. It wouldn't be the people that are casually signing off the 2016 oil and gas block offers. If we passively let these operations commence without taking a strong stand, we gain a new identity as a community, one that says we're happy for an intrinsically valuable ocean that we love to be put at risk for monetary gain. Now, how could we ever be proud of an identity like that? Now let's take a wee look at the economics. In your submission last year, you asked for more evidence that local benefits would be provided. And I'd actually invite you to look at any community overseas where offshore oil companies have moved in to extract local resources. They've left a shameful trail of environmental degradation, negative health effects, pollution, and the exploitation of local communities. Sure, there may have been some success stories in the past, but we're not in a comparable situation in New Zealand because we're about 50 years too late to become the new Texas. We need to let go of this idea. It's fantastical and it's laughable. Even if they were to strike oil or gas, it would be 7 to 10 years before they could go into commercial production, by which time, if current trends continue, the world will have turned its back on fossil fuels and be building their zero-carbon economies. We would be left with a skeletal drilling platform sitting off our coast. We would be the last bastion of a dying industry. Now, I've noticed that the economic argument for drilling is often presented as a false dichotomy, as if the choice between benefiting economically from drilling or not were a choice that existed in a vacuum, devoid of any other option. And that's simply not the case. If economic stability and resilience is what you're after, take a look around at the expertise, the innovation and the intelligence within your own community. Take a look at the groups converting cars to electric vehicles, at those pioneering electric bikes, and at the fast charge stations being set up, and at the gardens being grown to ensure our food security. These people and ideas, these are what we can be proud of, because they are promoting resilience to change, not vulnerability to it. Dunedin is on a path towards a clean, renewable and livable future. Please do not let oil companies unravel that progress. Our current economic stability rests on the health of our oceans for tourism and for fishing. Deep sea drilling puts all of that into severe jeopardy. I walked down to the beach the other day and I saw a pregnant sea lion lying on the beach waiting to give birth to her calf. Now, this is what we would be putting at risk, and no amount of black gold in the world could make that risk worth it.
Thank you, Sienna. My name's Rosemary Penwarden. I'm a medical laboratory scientist, a union organiser, and a mother and a grandmother. Councillors, I endorse everything Sienna, my colleague, has just said, but in the context of climate change, even the risk of oil spills or gas blowouts pales in comparison. We know we cannot burn most of the already discovered oil and gas and stay below 2 degrees of global warming. To ignore that scientific truth is a risk bigger than any other far into the future, to future ratepayers. As a city, we already face massive infrastructural and logistical decisions as we adapt to rising sea levels, to more floods, etc. We know the cost. In July, we were told from insurance estimates more than $28 million for the South Dunedin floods, 280 seriously and 973 further affected homes. This is urgent. To just accept government policy on deep sea drilling, knowing it will actively raise those costs, is, to borrow Vicky Buck's words, sheer lunacy. We must speedily transition to a low-carbon economy. We've proven that we can show leadership by divesting from fossil fuel extraction in our Waipori Fund. This is the next rational step. And right now, we have the opportunity to again show leadership from the south. We can join with Kaikoura and Christchurch councils to strongly oppose deep-sea drilling off our shores. And we've got here a petition, I think you've all got copies, 434 signatures, and 380 plus other people have emailed you separately to ask you to please strongly oppose deep sea drilling in your submission to the government for the 2016 block offer. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you happy to take questions?
Yes.
Questions, councillors? Councillor Wiley.
Thank you for that commentary. Question for you. Oil-free Otago. How much oil is off the coast of Otago?
They're still exploring for oil, so we don't know.
Okay.
Nobody actually knows.
Yeah, every piece of literature that I read on this and commentary from the New Zealand Herald on January the 7th, 2014, when Shell were looking for exploration, 1% was for oil, 99% was for gas
Yes.
and condensate.
That's what some industry people are saying. Did you read the 2007, the ODT, there was a geologist speaking in the ODT, I can't remember the name of it, but there was oil seeping up on one of the beaches in Stewart Island, and he said, that's fantastic news, because that means there's oil down there, not just gas. We don't actually know.
Well, I think from all the evidence I've read in the last 2 years, according to the exploration data, there is.
Yeah.
They are looking for gas.
The major thing, of course, is that we can't burn it.
The gas. So,
That's
you know, I'm
true.
not gonna
That's
look at-
correct.
Okay. The other part is the oil under pressure in the Southern Basin? Like you refer to the Horizon Pacific as being, you know, the Texas field was fully under pressure, and the issue that came about from that drilling operation was because of the pressure was under.
I'd just like to reiterate the fact that the big issue here that we're talking about is that we cannot burn it.
So
We cannot burn it basically because the science has said that if we were to burn more than about 25% of known reserves, then we would exceed that 2-degree limit, which has been set as the relatively safe limit for humanity. So exploring for more oil or gas in any situation is completely reckless if we're looking for a livable future for future generations.
It affects all of us. It affects us all.
the submission is on block offer, on the block offer,
Yes.
and not climate change. So I'm going to
Some more questions.
The interesting thing is that since 2013, no oil companies have taken up any of the new block offers in our region.
Councillor Calvert.
I'm just wondering, I gather one of the submissions that we received was from you.
Yes, that's correct.
So you've come here today to, as it were, have another bite at the cherry or reopen the submission process, or?
We're asking that the council takes an actual position on this issue. In the
did
past,
your submission not say that?
oh, it absolutely did. But I would like the opportunity to speak at a public forum.
So you'd like a further opportunity that other submitters don't
Other
have?
submitters were able to apply to come and speak today as well. I'm not sure I understand the relevance of your question.
We've got a process that allowed submissions and had a closing date for submissions and things, and I'm just wondering whether how appropriate it is from our point of view to add that for one group especially and an increased petition, unless there's a reason for why you didn't have a chance to get yours in on time, or would you like it opened up further to other people to extend the petition process? Or?
Councillor, that's a question for council to answer.
I'm asking whether they would like it. They've come here to ask things, and I'm asking them whether they would like it opened up further so as more petitions can happen and more people.
Can I point out that it's not a matter for them, it's a matter for council, and it is open to everyone to make a submission to public forum.
One thing I'd really like to say is that we greatly appreciate this opportunity because it is a way to extend our democratic rights. And we thank you very much for open forums, and we hope they will go on forever.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Peake.
Thank you, Your Worship. Your views on, and thanks, Yana and Rosemary, for your views here today. And it's pretty clear about, you're opposed to burning both oil and gas. But in terms of what Siana mainly was saying about the risk of disasters, can you just give us a view about whether gas is a lesser risk in deep water than oil in terms of a blowout?
I'm not an expert in terms of that particular area, but the entire process of oil and gas exploration, which includes the seismic surveying, the seismic ocean blasting would be a more accurate name for it, that entire process is detrimental to the health of marine ecosystems. So given the impacts of climate change, and the fact that we cannot continue to facilitate a reliance on fossil fuels, means that this entire process would be putting our futures in jeopardy. That would be local effects from any kind of spill or accident, but global effects in the form of climate change.
Gas blowouts do also cost a lot of money. Gas condensate can wash up on beaches. The other thing is that gas wells do also have fugitive emissions of methane, which, as we know, is 22 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So there are a lot of reasons why it is not a good idea to have a gas well. And also we know we cannot burn probably about 80% of the gas that is already discovered.
Councillor McTavish.
Your Worship, just one question, and that is the petition which you have tabled today is in addition to the, so it has not yet been submitted. Today is the first day that it has been tabled?
Yes, that's the first day. We sent an email asking whether or not it was appropriate to get it in by the date that council had asked for feedback on submissions, and we were told to present it today instead. But may I remind everyone that those submissions were collected on volunteer hours from our group, and we don't have a lot of time. I'm sure if we had more time, we would have been able to get a huge number more.
Councillor Daniels.
Thank you for your very clear submissions. Sonia, in your submission you said that regarding the economic effects of any kind of exploration, be it oil, gas, whatever, that there was, and I quote, nothing comparable in a situation in New Zealand. Do you not consider that perhaps Aberdeen in Scotland or New Plymouth in New Zealand would be comparable in terms of economic effects?
Well, the situations aren't comparable because of the time frame. So now we're in a position where we've seen the effects of climate change. We know the impacts of burning fossil fuels, and the world has woken up to the effects of our fossil fuel reliance. The reason I'm saying it's not comparable is because the decision is weighted very differently now than it was tens of years ago, when they weren't fully aware of the effects of climate change and they weren't fully aware of the environmental limits that we're breaching by continuing to explore and to exploit more oil and gas. The reason that it's a different decision now is because we know what's happening with climate change. We know that we cannot afford to burn reserves that we do know about. Therefore, exploring for more reserves is completely reckless. And the world's governments are meeting later this year in Paris to decide what to do and how to manage this major issue, which has been commented on as, you know, the biggest challenge faced by humanity. So we're in a very different position now than Aberdeen, or the New Plymouth in New Zealand is also not comparable because that's shallower depths that they'd be drilling at. So the deep sea oil carries far more risk. It's frontier oil, as Rosemary said, it's marginal oil, and we're the final frontier of the fossil fuel industry, and I don't think that's an identity that we want for New Zealand.
There's more money in renewables, particularly at the moment.
Further questions, councillors? Thank you very much for your submission. Next submitter is Jenny Olson, who wants to speak to us about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement and Councillors' previous resolution. Welcome. Next 5 minutes are yours.
Oh, hello everyone, and thanks for this opportunity. Now, I've come to talk today, as Mayor Cole says, about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Now, as we know, the Trans-Pacific Partnership has been agreed in principle by the 12 nations involved and is now going through the approval process in each country before the finalisation and passage into law. And I hope you all received the email that I sent beforehand with links on it talking about the process for this. That will give you an idea of what I'm going to talk about today. In New Zealand, the Trans-Pacific Partnership is seen first by Cabinet and then by the Parliamentary Select Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade, and finally legislation required to put the conditions of the treaty into place in New Zealand law are introduced into Parliament. So at no stage is the treaty itself publicly discussed, or is there any opportunity for input into its conditions. This despite the fact that the whole thing has been negotiated in secret, and so the text is still not publicly available, but it will be probably within the next week or so. And so we're receiving more information about the content of the TPP all the time, but we do already know enough to have serious concerns about it. Now, the DCC passed the 12-point resolution on the Trans-Pacific Partnership on the 18th of August 2014, which was great. And since then, 11 other councils around New Zealand have passed that same resolution, representing over 60% of New Zealand's population. 4 others have adopted partial version of the resolution, all expressing interest about the effects of the Trans-Pacific Partnership on the ability of local government to be able to make decisions which are in the interests of the local people. And I've put in the paper that I sent round a bit of a breakdown of some of the ways in which we already know that the 12-point resolution will not be upheld by the passage of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. So I won't go through all of those right now, but what I will do is talk about the main reasons that I am concerned enough to bring this to you today, and to ask that Dunedin City Council actually now goes back to the government, stands by the 12-point resolution that was adopted, and actually now express concern to the Minister of Trade, Minister Grosser, the Select Committee, and the Ministry of Trade and Foreign Affairs. Now, one of the big things, as I touched on at the beginning, is the democratic process that we have gone through with this. Democracy has not been upheld by the passage of the TPP, but it can be if councils now let the government know what 60% of their population is saying, and that is, we don't want the TPP in its current form. There are too many issues here that are contrary to the public interest. The High Court finding that Minister Grosser, ignoring the Official Information Act and rejecting Jane Kelsey's application for information, breaches New Zealand law, demonstrates how this government is actually failing to uphold the democratic process. Now, the second point I wanted to remind everybody of is the ISDS, or Investor State Dispute Settlement process. This was one of the points in the 12-point resolution, that a treaty containing ISDS clauses was not passed for New Zealand. ISDS gives corporations the right to sue governments in overseas tribunals if they pass legislation which can be said to interfere with the profits of those companies. Now, this is not something we want for New Zealand. These same rights do not apply to local businesses. They don't apply to any business within New Zealand. They're going to give big corporations more rights than the rest of us. And this actually does tie in somewhat to the previous submitters, and I must express support for them also, because the use of ISDS has been consistently by the fossil fuel industries in order to actually continue exploration where it is environmentally inappropriate. And which leads me to my third point, and that is around climate change. The Dunedin City Council takes climate change seriously and has placed it within the remit of local government. So we need to ask ourselves, why are the fossil fuel companies not carved out from the TPP? They would be allowed to actually sue government if decisions are made against their interests, making action on climate change extraordinarily difficult and setting for the future a difficulty with any legislation to protect our environment. In my view, that's not something that we want for Dunedin. So, what I have asked is that the Dunedin City Council approach the government, write to Minister Grosser, the Ministry of Trade and Foreign Affairs and the Select Committee on Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade to express the concern of Dunedin City Council over the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I've requested that the Council direct staff to conduct their own analysis of the TPP text when it becomes available, or of the appropriate summaries, because it is an extremely detailed text, to determine the impact that the TPP will have on Dunedin City Council and Council's ability to make decisions in the interests of the region, the people and their environment. I've also further requested that Council asks the Government to initiate a full parliamentary and public debate before proceeding with the consideration of the TPP, and that they carry out human rights, health and environmental impact assessments of the potential effects of the TPP on the people and land of New Zealand. Now, this relates to a report from the United Nations by an independent expert who has recommended that countries do this, has actually come down quite strongly against international treaties containing particularly ISDS clauses as something that can have very strong effects affecting human rights and the environment.
Can I ask you to wind up now, because you're
Yes.
more than 5 minutes.
Thank you. And that's the subject of my address today. Thank you very much for your time.
Happy to take questions.
I am.
Questions, councillors? There are none? Thank you very much for your submission. Our last submitted today is Neil Burrow, who's here to speak to us about safety on the roads. Welcome, Neil. Next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you. Lost my glasses somewhere, but that's all right. Firstly, no, she's right. Firstly, thank the for letting me speak today. My name is Neil Burrow. I live in St Clair, at corner of Richardson and Mill Street, actually. I walk around about an hour to an hour and a half every day, so I cover a lot of St Clair, St Kilda, South Dunedin and Musselburgh. Walking around those streets, it's quite an interesting place at the moment. I've become very frustrated with the planning and infrastructure of the South Dunedin cycle lanes. I'm sure you hear that a lot, but I just wonder if there was ever a survey done before they were started on the amount of cycles that are used in that area. It appears to me that there hasn't been, because it's mainly an older area, and you don't see me riding my bike around the Malaikos anyway, that's for sure. So that's just the first thing. Was it ever done? I doubt whether it was. Market Street and New Street, two of the main links between Queen's Drive and King Edward Street, have both been messed about with, and to go down those two streets now, it's just quite bizarre. It really is. The middle of Queen Street, nice wide road, and you've got to give way. You know, that's just a bit ridiculous. On the safety, when you come out of New Street and turn left into King Edward Street, the protrusions out there are just so big. They cover probably at least 1.5 metres to 2 metres. And in an average sized car, you've got to go over the centre line to get round the corner. Now, I know that a lot of the stuff is coming up, but let's not ever try and do that again. They're just too far out. They just stick right out. And as I say, it's the same if you're going the other way. You've just got to go far too far out into the centre lane to get round. In fact, my wife was saying the other day she came round there, and a car coming the other way was waving his fists at her, as much as to say, "What are you doing on the wrong side of the road?" They just come out far too far, so let's not let this happen again. the whole setup of cycling and etc. and the changing of roads, I would just like to know whether it's pushed by the councillors, the planners, the cycle people, or the Green Party. These are the people that it appears to be being pushed by, the last two especially. There's just not the number of cyclists out there. I was painted my fence the other week and I saw 2 bikes. And that's in Richardson Street, which you have put back partly to normal anyway. That's really about all, but there is one other thing that sort of gets my goat a wee bit, is John Wilson Drive. I was out there the other week, the last weekend of the school holidays, and it was a beautiful day, a lot of tourists around, and it wasn't certainly late afternoon, but next thing the security guy comes along to close all the gates, and these people just looked at it quite amazed. I know one of the early excuses was, well, people go up there and jump off the cliff. Well, you'd be better to go down here and jump off a parking building. If you don't die at the bottom, well, you'll be run over anyway. But that's just something I cannot understand, and I think it's about time the council got over that and opened it up again. Cameras are cheap today, and you could set up a camera and give out tickets. A good way of making a bit of money. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Burrow. Questions, councillors? Councillor Cull.
Since we're about to do some more consultation on South Dunedin cycle network things, can we have what you've been saying today sent through in writing, and we could put that on the pile of the beginnings of consultation again with residents and stakeholders of South Dunedin? I'd find that really useful. So if you could send it in by email or by letter.
Yep,
I'm sure somebody can
email
circulate
that in. Yes.
That'd be lovely. Thank you.
Yep.
Further questions, councillors? Well, none. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Burrow.
you. Well, sort of point of order or procedure, Mr. Chairman, how do we propose to deal with the issues that have been raised in the public forum? We often decide to refer something or raise it or send it somewhere else. You made a comment about one of the items. I'd in particular like to suggest a process or discuss a process for pursuing the concerns raised in response to the submission about the TPPA in particular, and others may wish about similar things about other issues.
Okay, if we go through the public forum items one by one, the legal high retail location policy, I note that the findings of the hearings panel are on the agenda today, so that can be discussed or addressed or whatever. Is there any? I think that would be the appropriate place to put it. The work opportunities within council, as you referred, I think we could refer that to the Chief Executive. The oil and block gas office refer to an item on the agenda today. What were you suggesting with regard to the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement?
Well, you're right. It is different from the others, and it seems to me that it is unique because we do have a position in the form of the 12-point resolution, or however many point resolution that was referred to in the submission, which expressed council's concern. So we've had someone come to us illustrating to us that our concerns haven't been addressed or are valid. It seems to me to be entirely appropriate to refer that for further discussion and further action somewhere at a council committee probably, because it would be good to have some comments to verify the claims that are made about the way in which what we know about the TPPA is in contradiction or conflict with our concerns about the sovereignty of this council and this country. So I think it would be appropriate to refer it in that direction, and I'm relaxed about which committee might be most appropriate. But I think it should be referred into the committee round sooner rather than later, so that action can be taken should we choose to do that.
With reference to the previous resolution of council, was that at council or was it at a I think it was on council. So can I suggest that we refer it to the chief with a view to a follow-up report, perhaps, to council, given that that's where it was, on the implications of that previous resolution and how that's panned out.
I'll be happy with that. Thank you.
Okay. And the safety of roads, Councillor Calvert has referred to where, suggested where that might be useful. So I think we can be assured that will be taken care of there.